The dragon was repulsed, but not vanquished, for he immediately availed himself of a servant who lived in the house with Joachim and Anne, and exasperated her against the holy matron. Through her he created even a greater annoyance than through the other women, for she was a domestic enemy and more stubborn and dangerous than the others. I will not stay to describe what the enemy attempted through this servant, since it was similar to that of the other woman, only more annoying and malicious. But with the help of God, Saint Anne won a more glorious victory than before, for the watcher of Israel slumbered not, but guarded his holy city, and furnished it so well with sentinels chosen from the strongest of his hosts, that they put to ignominious flight Lucifer and his followers. No more were they allowed to molest the fortunate mother, who was already expecting the birth of the most blessed Princess of Heaven, and who, enriched by heroic acts of virtue and many merits in these conflicts, had now arrived at the fulfillment of all her highest wishes. I too desire to come to an end with this chapter, in order to hear the salutary instructions of my mistress and preceptress, who, besides assisting me in all that I write, also favors me with her maternal admonitions, which I receive with highest joy and exaltation of my spirit. Speak then, O Lady, and thy servant will listen. If thou wilt permit, although I am dust and ashes, I will state a doubt which has occurred to me in this chapter. Yet in all things I will remit myself to thy sweet benevolence as of my mother, teacher, and mistress. The doubt in which I find myself is this: how was it possible that thou, the queen of all creation, conceived without sin and endowed with a soul exalted so high in the knowledge of all things by the visions of the divinity, shouldst be filled, in spite of all these graces, with so great a fear and anxiety of losing the friendship of God and of offending him? If in the first instant of thy existence thou wast prevented by grace, how couldst thou at that very instant fear to lose it? If the Most High exempted thee from original sin, how couldst thou fall into others, or fear to offend him who had preserved thee from the first offense? Instruction and answer of the Queen of Heaven. My daughter, hear the solution of thy difficulty. In the vision of the divinity, I instantaneously recognized my innocence and the stainlessness of my conception. These favors and benefits of the Almighty are of such a nature that the more they are understood and made secure, so much the more will they excite care and solicitude for their preservation, and for the avoidance of any offense of their author. They are given to his creatures out of pure goodness, and are accompanied with such clear intuition regarding their dependence on the merits of my most holy Son, that the soul immediately centers its attention only on its own unworthiness and insufficiency, convinced that it cannot merit them, and that it cannot appropriate them to itself, as being foreign to its nature. As they are seen to belong to such a high master, to whom they can revert to be distributed according to his pleasure, a most deep-felt solicitude fills the soul lest it lose again what is thus freely given. The soul therefore begins to work with great diligence, in order to preserve them and to multiply the talent, since it understands that to be the only means of keeping the deposit, and of fulfilling the order for which they were given, namely, to make them bear fruit and to contribute to the glory of the Creator. This care is precisely the condition necessary for the preservation of the benefits and graces received. Besides this, the soul is made to understand the human frailty and the freedom of the will for good or evil. Of this knowledge the Almighty did not deprive me, nor does he deprive anyone of it as long as he wanders through this life. But he gives it to all according to measure, in order that by its guidance they may be filled with holy fear of falling into any fault, even the smallest. In me this light was greater, and I clearly saw that a small fault prepares the way for another, and that the second is only a punishment of the first. It is true that on account of the blessings and graces of the Lord, sin was impossible in me. But his providence so disposed of this knowledge that my absolute security from sin was hidden to me. I saw that as far as depended on me alone, I could fall, and that it was the divine will that preserved me. Thus he reserved to himself his knowledge of my security, and left me in solicitude and holy fear of sinning during my pilgrimage. From the instant of my conception until my death, I never lost this fear, but on the contrary, grew in it as life flowed on.